Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. I think we've got quite a fascinating deep dive today into some pretty complex issues I know a lot of you have been thinking about. And that's the future of democracy and global conflict and this whole rise of AI. So many opinions, so many predictions out there. Where are things headed? What should we believe? It's hard to know, but that's what we do here, right?
Oh.
We dive deep into some fascinating source material and see what we can uncover.
And the source material for this deep dive is particularly intriguing. We're going to be listening to some audio messages from someone we're calling Morpheus Thinks.
Now, Morpheus is not like some big public figure or anything, but they've been curating and analyzing information on geopolitics and emerging technologies for years, and their insights are definitely thought-provoking.
Yeah, it really makes you think. And one thing that struck us right away about Morpheus is this really deep skepticism of human nature, especially when it comes to power.
Hmm.
They believe that our flaws, the greed, the self-interest, that tendency towards conflict, it's really holding us back from creating a truly just and equitable world.
Yeah, and you can see those flaws playing out everywhere, right? I mean, from global conflicts to political gridlock, even to the ways we've misused technology in the past.
Oh, absolutely. And here's where it gets really interesting, though. Morpheus believes that AI, particularly AGI, could offer a solution.
Okay, so AI is the answer to our human problems.
They see it as a potential antidote, to those weaknesses, that we have a way to create systems of governance that are more efficient and impartial and transparent than anything we've been able to come up with so far.
I mean, that sounds like science fiction, right? AI running the world. But then again, think about it. I mean, we've seen AI solve these incredibly complex problems in medicine, engineering, finance.
Hmm.
I mean, why not apply that same power to the challenges of governing?
Exactly. Morpheus's argument is that AI, unlike us, wouldn't be driven by self-interest or the need to amass power. It could operate based on a set of predefined ethical principles, solely focused on the well-being of humanity as a whole.
Okay, so essentially creating a system that's actually designed to serve the people rather than, those in power.
Precisely. And they even use this really interesting example, um, the transition from apartheid to a peaceful democracy in South Africa.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful example.
Because on the one hand, it's a huge testament to human resilience, right? Our ability to overcome these incredibly deep-seated systems of oppression. But it also shows how fragile that peace can be, especially if those in power are more interested in serving themselves than the people they represent.
And that seems to be Morpheus's biggest worry, right? Human nature is always going to undermine our best efforts to create this just and sustainable world. They point to current events like the war in Ukraine, the rising tensions with China, as evidence that we just haven't learned from the mistakes of the past.
Right. And they have this one line that really stuck with me. They said something like, "We have the tools to create a paradise on Earth, but we keep using them to build weapons and prisons."
Yeah.
It's a pretty bleak assessment of where we are.
Yeah, it's a pretty sobering thought, but there's a turn here, right? Because Morpheus believes that the emergence of AI, especially AGI, offers us a glimmer of hope.
It does. It does. And that's what we're going to unpack today. What makes them so convinced that AI could be the answer to these really deeply rooted human problems?
Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So we've kind of established that Morpheus sees a lot of problems with the way humans are currently running things, and they're putting their faith in AI as a potential solution.
Mm.
So how does Morpheus actually see this AI-powered future playing out? Like, what does it look like?
Well, one of the key concepts that Morpheus talks about is this idea of AI agents acting as a new kind of politician.
AI politicians, yeah, that's a pretty wild image.
It is, right? It's a huge shift from anything we've ever seen before in terms of government. But just imagine for a second you have an AI that's actually designed to represent the interests of a specific community or a constituency. It could analyze, mass amounts of data. It could track public sentiment in real time, identify areas of need, and then actually propose policies that are tailored to address those needs directly.
So instead of politicians who are, swayed by lobbyists and special interests or their own ambitions, you'd have AI agents that are really just focused on serving the people they represent.
Exactly. And because these AI agents wouldn't be limited by the same things that we are as humans, right? Like fatigue or emotional biases or, the need to campaign and fundraise, they could work 24/7, constantly monitoring data and making adjustments to make sure that policies are always aligned with what the people need.
It's like having this super efficient, hyper-rational public servant who never sleeps and never gets distracted. I mean, it almost sounds too good to be true.
I know it does, right? But Morpheus argues that this kind of AI-powered governance is not only possible, but it's actually within reach. They point to the progress that we've made in fields like machine learning, natural language processing, data analytics, as evidence that the technology is basically already here.
So it's not a question of if we can create AI systems that can govern. It's more a question of how we design them and implement them ethically and transparently and accountably.
Absolutely. And Morpheus is really clear about the need for human oversight in this process. They're not advocating for a world where AI just takes over completely and humans are left out of the loop.
So it's more of a collaborative model, humans and AI working together.
Exactly. A partnership where AI can actually augment human intelligence, help us make better decisions, solve these complex problems, create systems that really work for everyone, but they emphasize that humans need to be actively involved in shaping this future. We need to set the goals, we define the ethical boundaries, make sure that AI is aligned with our values.
Okay, so let's say we manage to create these benevolent AI politicians. How would they actually interact with the existing political systems? I mean, would we still have elections? Would we need like a whole new set of laws and regulations to govern their behavior?
Yeah, that's where things get really, really interesting because Morpheus doesn't lay out a step-by-step plan for how this would all work, but they throw out some pretty radical ideas. They talk about the possibility of replacing traditional elections with a system where AI agents are chosen based on their qualifications and their ability to actually represent the interests of the people.
So instead of voting for a candidate based on, charisma or promises or party affiliation, we'd be evaluating AI agents based on their track record, their data analysis skills, their commitment to ethical decision-making.
Exactly. It would be a whole new way of thinking about democracy.
And probably a pretty controversial one, too.
Yeah.
I can already imagine the pushback from people who say, humans should always have the final say in matters of government.
Oh, for sure. And it's a valid concern. But Morpheus's point is that we need to be open to challenging our assumptions about how democracy works, especially in this world where technology is changing everything so rapidly.
Okay, so let's play devil's advocate for a minute. What are some of the potential downsides of this AI-powered future? I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the utopian vision, but there have to be risks involved too, right?
Of course, no system is perfect, and AI governance would definitely come with its own set of challenges. I think one obvious concern is bias, right? AI systems are only as good as the data they're trained on. So if those data sets are biased, the AI itself could perpetuate those biases.
Right, and that could lead to all sorts of unintended consequences, like policies that discriminate against certain groups of people or, reinforce existing power structures.
Exactly. And then there's the question of control. Who controls these AI systems? If it's just a small group of tech elites, then we could end up with a system that's even less democratic than what we have now.
So we're trading one set of problems for another. We might eliminate the corruption and self-interest of human politicians, but then we risk creating a system where a few powerful individuals have even more control.
And don't forget about the potential for hacking and manipulation. AI systems are vulnerable to cyber attacks just like any other computer system. So we'd need to develop incredibly strong security measures to prevent bad actors from, messing with these AI politicians or using them for their own purposes.
Okay, yeah, some valid concerns there for sure. But Morpheus seems to believe that these risks are manageable, that the potential benefits of AI governance outweigh those potential downsides.
That's their argument. They believe that we can mitigate those risks by being really thoughtful about how we design and implement these systems. It's not about just blindly handing over control to AI. It's about using AI as a tool to help us create a better world.
Okay, so we talked about the potential benefits and the risks of this whole AI governance thing, but let's go back to Morpheus's analysis of like the current world situation. Geopolitics.
Right.
They see these same human flaws: the greed, the self-interest, the pursuit of power playing out on this global scale, especially when you look at the relationship between the U.S. and China.
Yeah, and Morpheus points out this really interesting contrast in how these two superpowers are kind of approaching global influence. The U.S. has traditionally relied on military intervention, whereas China has been focusing more on economic development, building infrastructure in Africa and other regions.
Yeah, it's almost like they're playing a different game, right? Less about military dominance, more about long-term economic strategy.
Exactly, and Morpheus sees this as a sign of China's strategic thinking, their ability to learn from history and
Yeah.
adapt their approach. But they also acknowledge the concerns about China's growing power, especially when it comes to human rights and their actions in places like the South China Sea.
Right. It's a very complex situation. No easy answers there.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say how this dynamic is going to play out. But Morpheus seems to think that AI could offer a way to navigate these geopolitical tensions a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, their argument is that an AI-governed system, because it's free from these emotional biases and the short-term thinking that we see so often in human leaders, could help to de-escalate conflicts and actually find solutions that benefit everyone
Okay,
involved.
but let's be real for a second. How do we actually get from where we are now with all these nation states and political ideologies and these deeply ingrained power structures to a world where AI is actually governing? I mean, Morpheus throws out this pretty radical idea, a referendum where people are given a choice between, crook A, crook B, or AI.
It's a provocative idea for sure, but it does kind of highlight the level of disillusionment that a lot of people are feeling with the systems that we have in place right now. Morpheus seems to think that if people were given a clear alternative, they might be willing to consider something as radical as AI governance.
Yeah, it's definitely a gamble, but as Morpheus points out, the status quo isn't exactly working wonders for us either, right? I mean, we're facing these existential threats like climate change, global inequality,
Yeah.
the potential for massive technological disruption. Maybe a radical solution is what we need.
And maybe AI, with its ability to process information, analyze data, make decisions at a scale and speed that we can only dream of, could actually help us navigate these challenges more effectively.
But even if we say, okay, AI governance is a possibility, how do we design and implement these systems in a way that's ethical and transparent and accountable? I mean, we've talked about the risks of bias, a concentration of power, the potential for hacking and manipulation.
Right, and those are just a few of the challenges we'd have to figure out. We'd also need to make sure that these AI systems are aligned with human values, that they protect individual privacy and autonomy, and that there are mechanisms for redress, if things go wrong.
It's a huge undertaking for sure. But Morpheus seems to believe that it's a challenge worth taking on. They see the potential for AI to not only solve our current problems, but to help us create a future where humanity can thrive in ways that we can't even imagine yet.
And I think that's ultimately what makes Morpheus's perspective so interesting. They're
Yeah.
not just criticizing the way things are, they're offering this vision of a better future, one where technology is used to empower humanity, not to control it or exploit it.
Yeah, it's a vision that requires us to really look at ourselves honestly, to acknowledge our limitations, and to be open to new ways of thinking and being. But it's also a vision that gives us hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, we can create a world that's more just and more equitable and more sustainable for everyone.
So, as you're thinking about all of this, the ideas that Morpheus has brought up, ask yourself, what role do you want AI to play in shaping the future? What are you hopeful about? What are your fears? And most importantly, what can you do to make sure that AI is used for good, that it's used to create a future that benefits all of us?
Well, that's it for this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, explored some challenging ideas, and hopefully got you thinking. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.